Elkton Community Education Center. I'd like to tell everybody it's the home of the butterflies and historic Fort Umpqua. But we actually do a lot more there. We're an independent, nonprofit organization dedicated to enriching the cultural, education, and social lives of rural Oregonians. We have a diverse set of programs that showcase the environment, culture, and history of the Umpqua Valley River. This benefits the residents and visitors of all ages and also provides job opportunities for our local students. I have a lot more information about ECEC. If you're interested in a brochure, just come see me after the talk. So, thank you again for inviting us out here today. The students earlier did some work with the butterflies to get some restoration happening with your butterfly garden to promote the habitat requirements necessary to attract butterflies and pollinators and beneficial insects of all kinds. You know, I am here today to talk to you today about hope. A hope for a future with butterflies. A hope for a future where our children hear the sounds of bees buzzing and birds chirping. Because there is hope in each and one of us today, because we are all here. There are lots of reasons why people love butterflies, and thanks to advocacy groups locally and around the world, many people are aware of the mounting pressures facing all pollinators. For this talk, we're not going to human bash and go down that list of all the bad things we've done. Instead, this is a message of hope and new beginnings. Just like this garden taking new shape, improving the biophysical conditions by changing the way we have done things to make a more holistic approach so we can, in our own lives and in our own backyards, make a difference. I'd like to plant the seed with each of you today that there is one thing we can all do to make a difference for butterflies and all species. Plant native and plant local. You can make a difference right where you are. And what's the importance of planting native? Well, native, you can adapt to soil climate conditions. It's natural to the area. It fits into surroundings and is low maintenance and reduces cost over time. Attracts birds and butterflies, offers food and shelter for many animals, and needs less fertilizers and pesticides and herbicides. So you get fewer diseases, and it's easier to be successful. We call this resiliency. And when we have a healthy ecosystem that is resistant to disturbances, we can attract all sorts of species and improve biodiversity for all. So I am not the butterfly steward at ECEC. I'm the site coordinator. But my background is in ecology and ecological restoration. And what I do is plant a lot of native plants to improve the soil and water conditions for folks in my community. So they let me come here today to talk to you a little bit about some things you guys can do to make a difference. So what do? We encourage people to plant and develop butterfly-friendly gardens like this at our schools, our parks, our roadsides, and in their own gardens. Many pollinator populations like bees and butterflies and other insects have been affected by human activity. And everyone has an impact on Earth's resources and its ability to support all living things. By planting native plants, we help restore Earth's soil and water resources for future generations. A native plant community provides the necessary habitat requirements for beneficial insects, like butterflies, like the monarch, but also other species that are part of a complex food web within the ecosystem. Organisms interact, driving nutrient exchange and plant community type. By planting native, you improve your soil below ground and the health and function of the plants above ground. This supports a whole host of interconnected species. Planting native improves overall biodiversity and reduces the long-term cost and maintenance of spraying herbicides and pesticides. So overall, improving water, soil, and air quality for all species. So what's that? Planting native is also good for humans? You know, and there are natural and human disturbances that are happening out there, and climate change is a big impact. And it will require a lot of work to change in human activity to correct. We humans, we pour tons of pollutants into the air and water and soil from our vehicles, our home, and from industry. These pollutants, they are known to affect our climate, and steps have been and need to continue to be taken to reverse this trend. As parts of our planet become warmer and storms become more intense, the plants and animals around us have to adapt or perish. When we take away the native plant community, we take away their opportunity to survive because the habitat requirements that they depend on for, let's say for example, the monarch butterfly, they are very specialized in what they will lay their eggs on due to the host plant relationship to the caterpillar and the egg. There's a toxin in the milkweed that when the caterpillar munches on that leaf, that adult butterfly had originally laid that egg right on that leaf for that caterpillar to then eat in its next life cycle, that puts toxins in its body that if a predator was to eat it, it would be able to defend itself. So milkweed is very special in the sense that this species will only lay their eggs on this plant because of millions of years of evolution. They have adapted to have this specialized relationship. And they are not just one species, they are the species that we recognize as a keystone species. We see them and we go, okay, something's happening to the system that we live in. We need to do something to make a difference. But you will be impacting a whole host of species by improving your native plants in your backyard and your community. Habitat loss. Butterflies and other insects have evolved with the species and plants that are native to a particular area. And by destroying native plants and using non-natives in our yards and our gardens, we may be destroying the very habitat these animals need to survive. Some of these insects adapt to using non-native plants, but others are so particular that if they don't find what they need, they will disappear. So how about you? Are you a picky eater, or do you like to eat what's ever available? Pesticides. I know that's a big thing for you guys and a big interest in trying to reduce the use of artificial pesticides because there's a lot of education out there about the harmful effects on monarchs and other insects. And it's true, farmers, logging companies, and gardeners do use pesticides. It has been seen as a necessary evil to reach their own natural resource objectives. We know now that there are better ways to do things, and through education outreach and opportunities to connect with native plant nurseries, educate schools, bring these types of parks into gardens. Together as a community, we can find better ways and more sustainable options to manage our natural resources together. A lot of this I know, but there's some stuff I just want to make sure that we really do get to talk about. A lot of information is displayed here. All of these boards have been put together through student projects. So after I'm done, I'd love to answer questions and talk more about what you can do in your own backyard to plant native and plant local. So butterflies, as we've learned, they need plants that flower early in the growing season as part of their habitat requirements. Are there flowers here now for the butterflies? It's a little early. They also need plants that bloom in the summer, and it's very important that they have nectar sources all year long. So one of the things that Elena and I were talking about with this butterfly garden is a lot of the perennials are just now coming up, but if we had more shrub layers and trees that had flowering opportunities now, that provides other provisions for lots of insects, but butterflies need protection from predators and wind. So they also need plants that bloom in the summer. So some butterflies, like the monarchs and painted ladies, migrate south in the fall to avoid the cold weather and so that they can find food in the winter. Do you see flowering plants in the winter in your own backyard? These are all questions to ask yourself. So when you go home today, take a look. Do you have things that are flowering? And as the spring and the summer commence, continue to observe your own backyard and see what you have. You know, Google is very accessible these days, but also ECEC has a wealth of resources and people there that would be happy to say, hey, it looks like you have some mock orange in your yard, and that's really good for early seasonal flowering opportunities. And if you don't, well, maybe we can get you some because we have a native plant nursery there. But there's a lot of things you can do just from what's available in your own backyard. So at ECEC, we have a monarch way station that we developed in 2017 that provides everything a monarch way station should have. So it provides all the necessary habitat requirements. We have planted milkweed for the females to lay their eggs on and for the caterpillars to eat, nectar-producing flowering plants for the adults to feed on, and shrubs for resting and protection from predators and wind. We also have wet sand and mud to provide water source and minerals for butterflies. So, in conclusion, ecologically speaking, We can all plant native plants to make a difference.
Yes, there is a little bit of research that goes a long way, of course, and there are plenty of resources through reputable organizations. You can stop by ECEC and we'll be happy to help you identify the best native plants for your own backyard. I hope I planted a seed today in you that you can make a difference, and that you can make a difference in somebody else tomorrow by sharing with them this easy thing that we can all do. Plant native and plant local.
Thank you guys.
I'm Diana Wales. I'm with Umpqua Valley Audubon, and also here from Audubon with spotting scopes are Beth Brown, Kathy Betaza, and Bill Fuller just walked off. But we do have, he'll be back, we have 3 spotting scopes, so we can talk about those in a little bit. So I was invited here to talk about the osprey, and it's interesting to be following the conversation about the monarch butterflies because there are similarities in the needs that the species have for a pretty specific food source and a pretty specific nesting site, as well as the impacts of pesticides that have been huge on osprey as well. So, and also shout out, love the new signage that the city has just put up about the osprey. Yeah, and I really could sort of say nothing and just say read the sign. But osprey are roughly grouped with the other raptors that are hawks, eagles, and owls, in that they hunt for and eat live prey. Well, formerly live by the time they eat it. The osprey, though, is unique and different than other raptors in some really specific ways. And one of them is wing shape. So if you notice here, there's this little bend in the wings, and the wings are actually quite a bit narrower, more streamlined than other raptors. And often when osprey are flying, if people are trying to, like, what's that bird in the sky, if you can't quite tell how big it is or how far away it is, osprey are more often mistaken for gulls than for the other raptors because of the wing shape and because of kind of how they fly. The other thing that's different about osprey from other raptors are their feet. And you can see in this picture that, so all raptors have 4 fingers or talons, but in most, in all the raptors except osprey, there's 3 forward and 1 back. Osprey, it's 2 forward and 2 back. And that, and the other difference is that the pad, if you will, of their foot is extremely scaly and rough, much rougher than other raptors. Those adaptations, all of those adaptations, are because osprey have a extremely narrow food source. They are fish eating. They are basically only fish eating. So the wings, the wing shape, and the aerodynamics of it, they dive into water, which other raptors don't do. So they're able to, pull their wings in, dive. They don't go really deeply like cormorants or something, but they do go underwater, and they need to have that more streamlined thing. The other thing is, I don't know if any of you are fisher people, but grabbing a fish, it can be kind of a tricky thing. So the scaliness, some people who fish wear special gloves that have a very rough surface to hang on to the fish when they're trying to take it out of the net. So that's kind of the same purpose of the osprey pads. And then the 2 forward and 2 back talons make it much easier for them to grab the shape that is a fish, where because they are so narrow in their hunting. Their coloration also is useful for the kind of diet they have. They are almost all white or light below. So if they're flying high, I don't know if you've ever tried, I keep looking for them today, but up against a cloud, they're almost impossible to see. And then this dark stripe, kind of like football players who will darken under their cheeks to lower the reflection. It serves that same purpose when they are, because what osprey do is they hover, they kind of soar around, they are looking down into water all the time. So they need clear water, they need a fish source, fish that are swimming relatively close to the surface. They're not a real deep diving bird. And so they will soar, and then they will drop into the water. They go in feet first and grab the fish. When osprey are flying with the fish, they are, again, kind of unique. Most raptors just carry whatever they have like this. Osprey carry it this way. So they also have sort of a different like hip design. They carry it so that the fish is head first, I guess more aerodynamic, but it's kind of a unique thing. So osprey have, their populations right now are relatively good. They've gone through a lot of ups and downs. In the West, so osprey nest, naturally, historically, osprey nested in big old broken-topped trees relatively near the water. Remember, they eat only fish, so they need to be near the water. They build really big, herky nests, big, heavy nests, and so they need something very substantial to build their nest on. So as agriculture and towns started being built in the same sort of habitat that osprey would normally occupy, they lost those nesting sites, and their numbers started going down. And then their numbers were really decimated, as were kind of all the raptors. I think people have heard about eagles with the use of DDT, the pesticide, in the 40s up until it was banned in the 70s. Really hit osprey hard. And so their numbers were really going down. But osprey are a urban adaptive bird. I mean, some animals, birds, are able to adapt to civilization, others not so much. So osprey, as communities were built, telephone poles were built, and big light racks, and now cell towers, and near the water, piling for docks, and navigational buoys in the middle of the water. And osprey adapted, because what they just need is something big and herky to build a nest on. So they started building their nests on all of these structures that were not being provided for them, but they took advantage of it. That started causing other issues, and it's part of why we have the pole that's right behind me here with a big platform on it. In Douglas County in Roseburg, if you look right behind, there are these beautiful big light racks over ball fields. And the ball field here, same thing at Gaddis Park. And from an osprey standpoint, they are absolutely perfect for building a nest. They are big, they are strong. If you think about it, you can tuck a nest in there very, very easily. That is not good for the lights, well, because it can short out the lights, which isn't good for either the osprey or the lights. Plus, these nests are built of big, heavy pieces of wood, which you don't necessarily want dropping on ball players. So, same thing was happening with lots of other electrical and other poles. They were just, the birds were doing a good job of adapting, but it was causing problems. So, Pacific Power and other utilities started figuring out that two things needed to happen, one of which has happened here, the other we hope will happen. One is to try to build something that is more attractive for the osprey than the light poles. And so that's what we have here, which if you'll notice, it is pretty close to where the light poles are, but it's higher, and it already has an even better structure on which the birds can build their nests. So it's to try to make it more attractive. The thing that hasn't happened here yet, that we in Audubon are still lobbying for, is to put structures on the light fixtures to make them less attractive. Because last year there was an issue, some osprey came in and started nesting on the light fixtures. They're a protected species, so if they get very far along in their nesting and breeding pattern for the summer, they can't be disturbed. And what works really well on anything, because again, these are big, heavy birds that need a big, strong, sturdy thing to land on, is that you can put the equivalent of floppy willow branches on the top of these platforms. Bird lands on it, doesn't hurt it, except it's not going to be able to stay on it, so it leaves. So we are hoping that the city will move forward with that, because it's kind of only a matter of time before they try the light poles again. So the other thing that's turned out is that, and this is what we have happening here today, is that geese, Canada geese, also absolutely love the platforms that are built for osprey. And so today we have our spotting scopes, and if you'd like to have a really good picture of a goose, or look at a goose, you can, or you can just look through the fence and see the goose right over there. But we had hoped we would have osprey. I swear that I was, 10 days ago I was here and there was an osprey on the nest, and you know, other people have said so. It's usually what happens is if geese come in, the osprey come in a couple weeks later and they harass the geese so much that the geese leave, the osprey take over the platform, and everything's fine. The geese find someplace else to nest because they have a lot more options. It's very unusual for geese to be able to reoccupy a nest once the osprey have arrived. So I'm not sure what's going on here. And that's one of the fun things about birding, is every time you sort of think you know what's going on, then something else happens. There is a pole like this and similar signage over by Stewart Park, the ball field's over there. That nest, last I knew, I'll go over and check after this, but last I knew it did have a pair of osprey on it. Has anybody, have you been over there? And,
yeah.
Okay. So there are osprey on that nest, and there may be osprey on this nest shortly. The osprey they're migratory. They tend to arrive here in February or March, build their nests, lay their eggs around the 1st of May, about 30 days for the birds to hatch, another maybe 6 weeks until they're ready to fledge or ready to start flying. During that whole time, well, and then they stay around and continue to be fed even after they're flying. Parents brood the young cooperatively, so both will be coming and going with fish. The female is actually on the nest a little more with the eggs, and until the young are ready to fledge, but they both do it, so they're both hunting. Very hard to tell. The female's a little larger than the male, but otherwise it's pretty hard to tell them apart in the sky.